François, tu m'entends? Oui.
And we are live. Bonjour, hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're logging in from. Well, welcome to this Canadian Society of Cinematographer and Arri live streaming. We're going to have a busy schedule today. We have a lot of things to cover. We're going to be talking about remote production. So as we're moving forward, I'm going to take the first couple of minutes with you to talk about how we got there. Why are we talking about remote production? So what you see on this slide right now is the history, the first generation of remote production. So when we talk about remote production, why do we talk about it and in terms of COVID-19? Because we were asked to isolate the talent from the crew on set. So as a result, we had to think outside the box. And I think that over the last couple of weeks at Arri, we were certainly ready. On the first day of isolation, we started to think as to how do we bring people back on set. And what we're going to be presenting to you today is kind of an interactive workshop where we took a couple of key director of photography Gaffer in Toronto, in Canada, and we basically asked them to produce content remotely from a studio in Montreal. So what you see on the right side, it's kind of what we've been spending the week on, but it's quite interesting because when it gets to remote production in today's event, we have a mix of the remote production itself, and we also have the social media delivery. And when we talk about social media delivery, there's been a lot of concern with internet service provider stability. And up until the last couple of minutes, we even had people in the group that were not able to connect. So we apologize for that. We'll do our best today. But there are solutions, professional solutions to alleviate that. And we wanted to make it as realistic as possible. So we went the risky route to see how it's going to go. And then after that, we can talk about how do we make it better. So if you look at this picture, you probably get a sense of what it looks like on set today, or what it might look like on set if you go back after COVID-19. So do we all dress up with hazmat suit? Do we all wear a mask? There's a lot of question about it. There's a lot of approach, a lot of ideas, thinking outside the box again. So an alternative would be to move people away from the set or the crew so that they're isolated from the talent. And when we talk about remote production, I will be leveraging the help of some Canadian colleagues. So we're going to have Director of Photography Douglas Koch. Thank you very much, Doug, for being with us, who's going to be crafting a nice picture for us. We're going to have Eddy Mikolič, also a gaffer from the Toronto area. And we're going to have myself. I'm the Arri remote production expert, but I work on a lot of aspects at Arri, so our entire team is ready to help you. And we're going to use Nicolas Fournier. We're going to use him and abuse him because he's the physical person in the studio in Montreal at Grande. Nicolas is the Chief Technology Officer, and he has a crew right now. So he's been helping us over the last couple of days to do this production. So when we look at the physical positioning or the geographic location where we're all placed, if you are not from Canada, we're basically in Canada, and we're on the eastern part of the country. So we're basically located in Ontario, the province of Ontario. And here we have myself, Doug, and Eddy. We're all in the Toronto area. We're maybe an hour apart from each other. So from a remote perspective, we're already a little bit far. But we have Nicolas, Benjamin, Abigail, our model, located in Montreal and in the province of Quebec. And they will be in close proximity to the set. They will be actually on set and we'll be controlling that remotely. So how did we get there? Well, over the last couple of weeks, we've had situations or interesting concerns. People have approached us and they said, I have a camera on the shelf and I need to get a picture out to air. And that's one thing, to get a picture out. To get a good picture is something completely different. So we've seen a lot of webcam look, the Zoom look, the 2020 looks. They're all going to have different expression that you're going to remember over the next couple of years. But one thing is definitely visible about the 2020 looks and the Zoom look. It is a novelty. It was cool the first week to be able to see Jimmy Kimmel or the team from The View or any other Canadian production, to see them with a picture from their home. It gave a different dynamic into the story. But as the situation evolved and continued, and basically we saw weeks and weeks of this isolation, people wanted to shift away from the Zoom look, from the news look, and go back to something that was comfortable, reassuring, regular television features and so on. So we need to bring back that production value. And what's interesting here is that there's a lot of concept that you're using right now that you've used on set for years. We've been doing feature film for more than 100 years. So there's a lot of the terms that you're using and the tools that you're using creatively that have been turned for other application. And when I say other application, one example is that in these scenes, you're going to see Jimmy Kimmel, and in the back of Jimmy Kimmel's desk, we see some pictures. They were selected, and on the right side, we see a similar setup where we have an on-air talent and we see things in the background. So whatever is in the background with a deep depth of field, with a webcam, is probably going to become the subject of discussion on blog and social media. So in some cases, after the first week, after panicking and getting to air quickly, we realized that the quality wasn't there. So they start to bring LCD monitor to go behind the talent to give them back privacy. So privacy is a big one, and we're going to go into that into 1 second. But if you're looking at this picture, the right side is interesting because it shows the contrast between people in studio with a crafted picture with a director of photography, lighting director, gaffer, and at the top, we see a situation where we're using webcam, and we're basically placing the camera there, and we're saying, you're live. That's it. So we clearly see that the issue here is not necessarily the transmission pipeline. It's the fact that we need to bring back the creative talent, the people who are crafting that picture, into the mix. So let's go talk about privacy a little bit more in detail. If you look at this picture, it's something that we had done a couple of years ago for the Signature Prime, the Arri Signature Prime launch, and it's a shell depth of field achieved with a wide angle lens. And it's really interesting here because this is something that's easy for us to achieve, to get that cinematic look. But in this case, it takes a completely new meaning. It's about privacy. It's about hiding what's in the talent's home. Their library at the back, their bookshelf, if we're shooting a kitchen, whatever they have in the background that hasn't been cleaned and things like that. So it brings them back privacy. But the other thing we've learned in the first couple of weeks was physical space. So in this example, we have a 47mm lens, and that 47mm lens on a large format sensor equals about 33mm in Super 35. So for those of you who are using the Alexa Mini, the Amira, you're comfortable with Super 35. So the angle of view would look a little bit different. So it's a fairly wide lens. So traditionally, if we want to go wider angle, we're going to have a deeper depth of field. We won't have quite that same quality or that cinematic quality. But in this case, using a large format sensor and using a wider angle lens that is fast, we're able to keep that shell depth of field, so keep that privacy in a COVID-19 situation while we keep the cinematic look. So really important. All a complete reversal of what we're doing on set just to be able to achieve a complete outside the box approach to going back to air. The other aspect, and I lost one monitor, the other aspect of our system has been about dynamic range. And you're comfortable with shooting log C, you're comfortable with 14 plus stop of dynamic range. And in this example, we see a model going to our window, opening the curtain. So we're going from maybe -7 to +8.5 stops. So we have a really wide dynamic range. What's interesting is that in that COVID-19 situation using webcam, we went back to 4-5 stops of dynamic range with a good webcam. So we're really far from what we had with professional cameras. So what we found is that bringing back the proper tool, bringing back the Alexa on set, meant that if you have an uncontrolled environment, if you have that balcony door next to the talent because they're in their home and they don't want to have people coming in to install gels on the window and things like that, we're able to give you a dynamic range that will get the shot done. So that was a really important one also. That's completely linked to customers' feedback. The other thing that we learn is makeup and skin pigmentation. Again, completely new. So we were in a situation on a Monday morning where we're isolated, where people were saying, I have an in front of the camera, the talent is in front of the camera, and it looks poor. It looks poor, the picture is lackluster because there's a lot of these cameras that have electronic enhancement. So they basically are meant to give you more contrast, more color, to give it a little bit of a social media look. And the problem with that is that all your pigmentation comes out, and you're now asking a talent to apply their own makeup. So that hasn't been easy. And this is another place where we saw that using cinematography tool, bringing them back in the mix, meant that we have accurate color reproduction, skin tone reproduction, and we didn't have these artifacts created by electronic filters. The interesting thing here is that in this picture, none of them are models. They're my colleagues. There's Christine, there's Fred, Simon, a couple of other people that I have not interacted with. So they were not professional actors. They were not models. They were just regular colleagues that you might bump into if you go to a trade show. But it tells us a lot about how do we go from somebody who has the skin tone that we're looking for the movie, and then we need to substitute to somebody else. And it becomes an important question because we've even been asked about recasting, let's say looking at couples to recast them instead of taking an actor from position A and position B, because we need to continue moving forward and we really need to think outside the box. In some cases it works, sometimes it doesn't. In Montreal, because we're in Canada and we're doing the set in Montreal, it's interesting because most of the population is located close to the Montreal area. So there's a lot more production in studio close by, and there's a lot more actors, some of them married, some of them a couple, but they're all physically located close to Montreal. So as a result, there's a potential to recast. It also means that there's a local accent that fits the area, but it's certainly not something that we can extend everywhere in North America. So there's a couple of issues there. We need to think outside the box. So what do? We want to go back to full quality. And if we look at this picture here, we have a perfectly composed picture. This is the kind of thing that you as CSC member, director of photography, gaffer, camera crews, are doing all the time. It's a nice picture, rule of thirds, Rembrandt lighting. We have a nice bokeh. We can actually see the cat's eyes effect of the lens as we're moving toward the edge, and it becomes like a nice circle in the middle. So all of these look like it was a professional picture achieved on set. Does it mean that we cannot achieve a high quality picture if we are in an isolated and uncontrolled environment? Who knows? Let's look at how this picture was created. It was created at NAB in 2018 at the National Association of Broadcasters, and it was in a trade show floor with sodium discharge light at the ceiling. We had a competitor beaming lights in our booth and all of that, and yet there's no flag. There's only 3 key components. There's a camera in front, an Alexa LF with an Arri signature prime. We have an S30, a SkyPanel S30 in front, and we have an L7, a Fresnel, an Arri L7 Fresnel at the back that you don't really see on this picture, but that was the hair light. So it means that we can indeed create a professional picture in an uncontrolled environment like a basement, a kitchen, a library, as long as we have the creative crew, the camera crew there to be able to guide that process, to craft the picture. So that brings us back to what about the risks? And that's interesting because the picture you see here is a burnt Alexa. It's an Alexa Classic that was in a fire, and we tend to overbuild things on set. We tend to make sure that whatever happens, you're going to continue to shoot. The burnt Alexa here was in a fire because of visual effects, or actually, no, this one was because of burned batteries. The batteries were not registered, not certified or anything. There was a fire, the camera burned down, but this production crew could continue shooting. The camera still turns on, you change the lens in front, you can continue to shoot. Here, there's a big white spot on the right side where there's nothing. And that is the internet. That's the problem. With COVID-19, we might have the toughest product in the world. We need to find a way to bring the signal back to the post-production facility, back to the production company, back to the television station. How do we do that reliably? And unfortunately, currently, with a single internet service provider, there's a big risk, a risk that is actually higher than getting a camera in a fire. So how would we do that traditionally? And this is what happened on the first morning of that COVID-19 isolation. People said, how do I usually send video signal back to a station or to a post-production facility? I use a truck, a satellite news gathering truck, maybe a microwave trucks. In this case, there's 2 issues with it. One of them is that this truck is not available. It is not available because it's booked to cover the news. And there's a lot of things happening right now. So they're fully booked. You're not going to get one. The other issue is a public relation concern. If you are an A-lister and you are in front of your mobile phone, you're in Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, and you just made a posting on social media, and you're basically told your fans, stay at home, protect yourself, protect your family, and all of a sudden, you have one of these trucks coming in your driveway, you're attracting attention. And those are news trucks. So when they show up in your driveway, chances are that something happened. You're attracting way too much attention. It's not consistent with your message. So we had to find another alternative. So what we did is, thinking outside the box, we thought, how do we feed video remotely? So over the last couple of weeks, I've been working with one of my colleagues on the West Coast, Jason. And Jason is close to Pasadena. I'm in Toronto, Stouffville to be exact. And we were feeding video back and forth using different techniques. And we tested many things. We've also tested remote control and all of that. So that's how we got here, to help people to go back to set, even if they were isolated, and bring back the creative talent into the mix. So in my basement, I currently have 3 key devices. I have a light in front that is a sky panel. It's an S120. Here I have a picture of an S60, but essentially the principle is the same. I have in the background an orbiter, and boy, is that a special orbiter. It is black. It is one of the only black orbiter in North America. There's not many of them. There are sample units, and we are happy to answer any question if there are on the product. And my colleague, Mike Dobson, who's in charge of lights at Arri Canada, can also answer these questions if you have any questions. And at the bottom, we see the Alexa Mini LF. And if you look carefully, you're going to see that there's something different about that camera. On top of it, you will notice a box that you might be less familiar with. It's a box made by a company called DeGiro. It's a Canadian company, and the model is the Engo. So what we've done is we've partnered with a local company in Toronto called First Mile Technologies, Brendan Cooper, that some of you might know, you might have seen him on set. And the idea is that Brendan represents DeGiro, and we've worked together, our team in California, Toronto, New York, DeGiro, First Mile, and we looked at that and we said, how do we bring back high quality picture back to the production company without using a satellite truck, without using all these things? And this product is mature, has been in use for at least 10 years. It's been used mostly in the broadcast and television industry, but how do we turn it into a cinematic solution? So this box, I have one here. This box is this. I'm just going to zoom out. The idea is that it's a fairly small box that we can attach to the camera. We can also attach it to a QTake cart. So you could take the output of a QTake cart. And at the front, I have an Arri wireless video receiver. So my camera is transmitting to this device. It goes into this box, and I have a gold mount battery to power all of that. So what does it do for me? Well, it does a couple of things. One of them is that it reduces the risk. And when I say it reduces the risk, we're transmitting to the web, but we're using multiple cell network. So one of them could be Bell, one of them could be Rogers, one of them could be TELUS, one of them could be Videotron. So those are the 4 main carriers in Canada. There are others, but those are the main carriers. And this box is basically going to receive the video from my wireless video transmitter. It's going to display it. So there's an onboard monitor. And then after that, it's going to tag along to the cell phone and go out. So we're ensuring privacy. That's the first thing. It means that if we walk into somebody's home, we don't have to say, can I have your Wi-Fi password? Can I have your LAN connection? We can even connect that to a satellite transmitter if you don't have an internet connection, but it's about privacy. The other thing that it does really well, it's about reliability. Because right now I'm using a single internet service provider to go from my home to you. Same thing with all the people on the line, Doug, Eddie, Nicolas. So it means if the internet bandwidth goes down into your local network, or goes down into your street, your neighborhood, you're out of a signal. So here what we're doing is we're leveraging multiple receiver, multiple transmitter, so that the bandwidth from each one of them is aggregated together to give you a bigger pipeline. So this, I think, has been the most important feedback this week in the test that we've done. We had Doug doing production remotely in a set that he had never scouted, had never seen. So how do we give him a reliable feed going back to his home? We could use these techniques. So we really have to think outside the box. But you remember in the beginning, I talked about bringing back the creative talent. And this is when we're going to go back to Doug and Eddie, who have years of experience or award-winning. They've done so much work. You've probably done their work, and they're going to talk about it a little bit later. But I would like to turn it over to Eddie. So I'm going to do something. I'm going to have to cheat a little bit. I need to do a switch on my computer. So Eddie is going to take control of my computer. I'm just going to, give me 1 second, Eddie. Give me 1 second. I will put that full screen. Okay. So Eddie now has control of my studio, and I will do the Wizard of Oz scene. I am currently in my basement in Stouffville, Ontario. I'm not in a studio, I'm in a basement. And in front of me, I have a light that is an S120 sky panel. Behind me, I have the orbiter. And in front of me, I have an Alexa Mini LF. So Eddie actually has control of these lights and the camera. And I'm just going to give you a hint as to what his screen looks like. It's going to take me 1 second. Let's turn that on. So Eddie, your microphone should be unmuted now. Can you start to guide us through how you would make this scene look more interesting with the light control that you have?
Well, good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Fast Eddy here, Gaffer, Toronto for the last 30 plus years, 35 odd years. So happy to be a part of this demonstration. Of course, we've all thought for countless years now how great it would be if we could just phone it in, and this is almost that in a funny sense, because over the last few days, or week and a half that we've been talking about this, I've had the opportunity to sort of play with these lights and yeah, literally kind of phone it in. So as François said, I do have control of these lights, and let's see what we can do. Mind your eyes, everybody. So that's the orbiter at 100% at 3,000 degrees Kelvin, and with no green. And so I don't know if there's a way to potentially screen share the control mechanism, François, so that everybody can see. Right now, I am the one that's moving the cursor around. And so basically, you can see that the CCT box is highlighted there. That has given me the access to the intensity of the light and the color correction of the light in terms of daylight or tungsten. Hey, let's make it 20,000 degrees. So right now we're looking at an Arri orbiter that is 20,000 degrees Kelvin. That's right, 20,000, where normal Arri sky panels will only go to 10,000. So that's quite something. And it'll go down to 2,000 degrees Kelvin, whereas a normal LED sky panel from Arri will only go to 2,800. So the range on this orbiter is quite extended, a quite massive range. And also, I noticed as a gaffer, we use these lights all the time, most recently. And my crew and I were some of the first, we were the first crew that thought, as François was saying, in these times, you have to think outside the box. And in lighting, I feel, I hope that, that's how we always think, kind of outside the box, to try and make something new, to try and make it something a little bit different, a little, and always in the hopes that it makes it more efficient and easier for everybody. So what we did was when the sky panel first came out, we realized its potential as a space light. And so we were the first crew in Canada to put 80 to 100 Arri S120s, S60s, pardon me, in the ceiling as skylight ambient light outside big sets that we had built. It was a bit of a challenge for production, to get production to buy off on that system. But when they realized the benefits of it, ultimately it was a go. And so we had a lot of problems in the past bringing those particular sky panels down in level to levels that were very user friendly when we have such receptive chips in these Alexa Mini cameras. We could not really bring the lights down far enough where this orbiter has been designed with new software that I can bring it down to 1%. And that to me is quite a feat in itself, because I can also bring it down even further. I can bring it down to 0.5%, and I'm doing that on my computer right now, and hopefully that's where it is. And so the range and the dimming of the new orbiter is pretty spectacular. The color range is also pretty spectacular. I can as well show you a quick control of the S120 that has been placed to camera right on this picture that you're seeing. And right now, I've taken the color. I'm sure everybody saw the color go up to 10,000 degrees. Let's just take it to a more sort of user-friendly 5600 that we're all used to. Okay, there's 5650, and I'm going to increase the level a little bit. So now here we are at close to 50% on the S120 at 5600. And the orbiter, we'll give them a bit more of a backlight, and we'll take it up to 35%. There's 35% at 2000. You know what? We're going to make that daylight as well, so that everything's nice and close together. And so guess what? I'm phoning it in without a phone. So this is pretty spectacular kind of technology. The one missing piece is, of course, that I'm actually not in the studio, moving these lights around. And so, with a witness camera that you'll see the picture of from the Montreal studio, and there's the witness camera in the Wizard of Oz's studio there. It's a little cumbersome in that. I've always been, anybody who knows me and has worked with me knows that I've always been very hands-on. And so I'm the guy that'll run and put the light in the right place, or the backlight in the right place, or set the level, because I have a good idea as to, where or what it should be doing. And it's great, François and all his guys in the Montreal studio, and François in his studio in Stouffville, and Nicolas and all of his assistants in the Montreal studio. They've been great, but it's a little frustrating for a guy like me, because I want to be there with my gloves, and with my bullshit glass if I need it and stuff to do the lighting. But this is the next best thing in these strange pandemic times, that we can control lighting, we can and control cameras, from our homes. The only thing that's the same for me right now is that I'm wearing my ball cap and I have my sunglasses, because that's how I always look when I'm at work. But I literally am in my basement, doing this with everybody that's on the call right now. And so, we can also, once again, if you can pin the screen for everybody, yeah, there we go. Here I am moving the cursor around. We can also, do all kinds of things like lighting effects. So let's give them a little bit of a cop car effect here if we can. And then if we can see you again. So there's the orbiter doing a little bit of a cop car lighting effect. You know what? I think I want to make the S120 kind of match that. So I'm going to go to the effects panel on the S120 and call up a little process trailer effect. So now we have street lights going by as François is being chased by the police. So for what it is, it's really quite interesting. I was doing this from my cottage last week when I was practicing with this system. So anywhere that you can get a Wi-Fi connection or a data connection, and you can sign into these to take control of these systems. You can do it from anywhere, and so you know, it's been kind of a real treat for me to be a part of this, because, as I said, Doug Coe, who you'll meet very shortly, and I have been working together for about 35 years, and we've always wondered, like, oh, you know, like if we could only call it in and not have to actually go to work. You know, I guess this is still going to work, but we are calling it in. And so, you know what? Maybe I'll go back to sort of a more gentle look on François, and so that he's not being chased by the police. Stand by, everybody, and I'll hand it over back to you, François.
Thank you, Eddy. We're going to be doing a couple of things. So Eddy is going to give us back a more traditional look, less special effects. So the way he's doing that is basically going into the system. He's going to go to the lighting effects at the top, and he's going to be able to stop the lighting effect. In the case of the police car, we were able to change the pattern, so how many flashes, which color, and things like that. So that's what he's done. Now he's going to the orbiter, and he's going to be doing the same thing. So the interesting thing here is that we've talked about lighting, but we haven't talked about camera. So Eddy is now preparing the scene for the next one, but we could easily show you camera control as well. So what I would ask is for Eddy to, well, he's finishing setting up the light in front, but if he could just switch to the tab for the camera after he does that.
Stand by.
Excellent. Excellent. Can you go to the camera tab, please? That's the third tab.
Yes, I see the tab. Here it is. Here's the Alexa Mini LF tab.
Excellent. So basically what we see here is the Alexa Mini LF tab. It looks exactly like what you would have on your camera, and Doug could actually control things remotely. So if I was to put him on the spot, and I will, can you give me an ND filter that would be different than 0? Can you give me a 6?
Oh, I don't think I'm hooked. I'm not patched up to this.
Oh, but Eddy has control, so Eddy could probably do it. Thank you very much, Eddy. So what happens here is that quickly Eddy is able to, and you probably haven't seen it moving because I was on the wrong input. Can you give me a 1, 2?
Sure. You know, I'm going to go 1.8. Let's go big. Go hard.
Let's go big.
Whoa.
Yes. So basically, all the controls on the camera are possible. And it's interesting because when Eddy was talking about the light not dimming all the way to 0, the orbiter could dim all the way to 0. Most of the lights don't, and there's a reason for that. They're diode and they need a minimum voltage to turn on. But basically, many people are saying, I would like to be able to drop an ND so that I can boost my lights, and they don't have to ask somebody to go in front and play with it. But at one point, Doug stepped in and said, I don't have control because Doug is now controlling something else. But the interesting thing here is that both Eddy and Doug can now work on this studio. Eddy can work on the light, and Doug could work on the camera, or the camera crew can have control of the camera, and the lighting crew can have control of the light. So we're finally bringing people back in to have the creative control, to be on the intercom, talk to each other, saying, can you give me this and this and this? So the synergy you have between all of you is back. So what we're going to do now is we're going to trick things a little bit. Eddy, if you want to drop maybe the ND back to maybe a 0.6, because I'm quite dark here. Okay, so what we need to do is that Eddy is going to disconnect from my system, and while he's disconnecting from my system, he's going to the Montreal system. So it means we have in Montreal, the Grande studio, we have a setup that is much bigger, and I will turn to, wow, Eddy, you're really cutting the light on me. Yeah, oh, okay, leave it there, that's okay. It looks better. So basically, Eddy is going to be leaving us for a few minutes. He's going to be transferring his connection. So he's going to be dialing into the Montreal studio instead of the Stouffville studio, where he will be taking control of the light. I will be dialing into the Montreal studio where I will take control of the camera. It could have been Doug doing that, but we found that because we didn't have a director, because Doug was doing director of photography and director, he had a lot of things to do. So he said, you know what? I would see somebody operating a camera, and there's not anything that is complex in this case, so I will be stepping in. But there is something interesting I would like to show you, and I will share my screen 1 second. Give me 1 second.
So I am now connected back to the Grande studio in Montreal, where Nicolas has been so helpful, and all of his guys.
Thank you very much, Eddie. So I will switch to studio soon. Just to let you know that as this situation evolved, I think that what we found interesting is that the questions and the requirement have evolved as well. In the first week, it was all about how do we get a picture on air. In the second, third week, we started to see how do we make that picture better. In the fourth, fifth, sixth week, it was about how do we bring lights to create separation with our subject. And then after that, it went to, oh, can we move the camera? And that's interesting because if you looked at the shots that I had in my studio, you might have noticed that in front of me, the camera is mounted on a remote head. This one is called an SRH3, a stabilized remote head, 3-axis. That's where the acronym comes from. But the idea here is that this head lets us not only do remote head control, it's also a stabilized head that can be used for other application, instance, and all of that. But what I want to attract your attention to, which is probably a question that many people are going to have, is about lens control, focus. We're going to talk a little bit about focus later on as we discuss with Doug and Eddie and Nicolas. But the idea is many people are asking, can we control focus? Absolutely, if we're using the remote head. And one thing that is unique about this head is that it has built-in control of the L bus. So if you're a focus, a first AC, a focus puller, first AC on set, second AC, you're connecting the camera, preparing it, you're using those red L bus cable, they connect to the head, and they are basically controlled remotely. So I can adjust the iris, I can adjust the focus and all of that. So nothing special here. The transition, the learning step is not as difficult as if we were changing technology, because that is the issue. We are unknown. We're in an unknown environment about how are we going to interact with our colleagues, wearing masks. And wearing masks all day is not easy. I've been trying it for the last couple of weeks, and it's not easy. We are dealing with what is going to change on set. So if in addition to that, we have to learn how to use the tools that we're familiar with and to shift it to other tools, and on top of that, we need to learn new expression like HEVC, H.265, social media streaming, uplink bandwidth, and so on. It is starting to be quite nerve-wracking. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn it over to Doug, who's going to be our expert, our director of photography, our cinematographer for the next couple of minutes. And he's going to be going over his experience this week operating a remote setup with the Montreal crew.
All right. Yeah. So I guess if we show maybe we should show just a quick shot of the studio there at Grande Montreal. And basically, we just said, okay, the assignment will be, we're going to go into this space. We're only going to use a little bit of it, maybe as if we were in like a larger living room or an office or something like that, some more contained space. And we're basically, we'll try to create like 3 lighting setups. But the idea is we'll sort of set them up with particular light sources and grip gear and stuff, and then basically walk away from it. And then basically we'll try and have sort of 3 different looks, all of which are controlled basically externally without people having to sort of move stuff around. So the whole experience, of course, is very unusual because we didn't know what the space actually looked like. And it's very unusual and very disorienting, especially because there's a lot of black curtains in the background. So when Eddie and I would be looking at it and sort of lighting it, we wouldn't even be sure what we're actually looking at. So there's definitely potential in these kind of remote situations for sort of obviously sort of frustrating situations that you wouldn't normally run into if you were just standing there, just little things you would take for granted. So you're either looking through the camera, and you can tell or you can't. One of the big things we learned, obviously, is the use of some sort of overall witness cam is probably a really, really good plan, so that at any moment, everybody can sort of look and see what's going on. You can tell what's potentially in the way of other things, where things have been put. That's a big thing that you take for granted when you're just standing in the space, obviously. That's it. And then just the sort of working remote, it's very strange. I would say that it's obviously much slower and more frustrating than one probably even imagines that it sort of will be. And I would think that if you were doing it, it's one of these things where people that you have on the inside, the sort of sterile workers that are on the inside that are allowed to actually go in there and move things, it's really a great idea if they're actually people that you're quite familiar with. So as much as, you know, we had fun with Nicolas and his team, you know, for me, if it was, say, Eddie himself was actually in that space, that's obviously going to be much smoother thing, because he and I have a huge history going back decades and that kind of thing. So I think that's something too, is that the more it's a real team thing and communication thing is the big thing. So the more everybody's really familiar with each other, the smoother and more efficient that's going to be. And yeah, it can be a lot of fun, but if you're unfamiliar with each other and you know, maybe even have different terms for equipment, like if you're trying to do this like in other countries, say, and things could get quite exciting. So that was sort of the main things that we learned. And then so the basic assignment is we just sort of created these little setups. And then what was really fun was, and I think that this is what makes it really handy, is we're able to make a lot of changes in terms of brightness and color. We can't actually, of course, move. We've made the assignment such that we can't actually move the lights and the gear, but we can certainly say things like, well, let's see what this looks like darker, or let's brighten this up, try this warmer or cooler. So we'll show you a few different variations on it. And I guess so in each case, we'll sort of move the A camera, as it were, into a position. We'll look at it, and then we can tweak the lights if we want to play with it or whatever. And then we've just done a little camera move. So a couple of things come into this, which I thought were critical things. So any DP, director, clients, showrunners, producers, people who have a vested interest in what's being filmed, obviously are going to want a good look at this and are very used to seeing, you know, broadcast quality monitors right in front of them and can see. So that's one thing. And that's something I think François can sort of address, or, you know, we can deal with this thing for sure, that, like, I'm sure it's the first thing people are probably going to ask, because a lot of when we were doing it, I found, is you be saying, what's that thing back there? What's this? What's that? Because you are looking at a highly compressed signal initially. And whereas you're used to, of course, something that's like broadcast quality and you can clearly sort of see what it is. So that was sort of one issue. And then, as he addressed also, I think focus is another issue. We're using an Alexa, not an LF, but a Super 35 size Alexa with a Master Prime. It's a Master Prime 32 millimeter lens that's going to be on the camera. The reasoning behind this, of course, going into these sort of issues of privacy or even just the look. And people, of course, are really into shallow focus and those sort of textural looks these days. So that's basically the idea, is we want to create the shallowest possible depth of field in the frame size. And of course, this also raises issues of what will the focus pullers do. And again, I know François has things to say about that. So I'm not sure, should we go into the first setup, or do we want to address any of those things, or what's the best thing to do you think, François?
I can take maybe 1 or 2 minutes to answer some of the points, and then we'll roll into the studio. When it gets to monitoring, I think the interesting thing is that you might have seen an article a couple of days ago, or information that was sent by a local rental house, Sim in this case. Shout out to Sim for the QTake information. They were saying, you know, if you have a DIT on set and they are using QTake, maybe they can capture the information from all camera and refeed it to different location. So this is something that's possible, that's easy to do. And if you do not have an internet access, there are some solutions. So in the case of the Digiro that we're using, there's also a device called a gateway that can let you have internet access if you are on a set and there's no dark fiber, whatever. So that's a possibility. The other thing is that it's really easy to put a server, a receiver. It basically has internet in and HDSDI out, and we can put that into the director of photography's home. We can put one into the gaffer's home. We can put one into the VFX location and so on, so that what they would see in front of them is a traditional broadcast monitor. So we're talking about an OLED monitor, HDSDI in, and that device will feed you a signal that's going to have about a 1 second latency. Latency is something that unfortunately we're not going to get away from. 1 second, sub 1 second is really impressive. And this is what we would have needed to provide Doug this week. If we were to move on to a commercial shoot, I would strongly recommend that we provide a dedicated link for him for the camera 1, 2, 3, 4, and same thing with Eddy for lighting, in addition to the witness camera. So the witness camera was mentioned many times today. It becomes a new keyword on every remote production. We will need to have some form of witness camera, which we see right now. Thank you, Jeremy. So we see a camera that is placed behind. It shows an overview of the studio. So it gives us a sense of how close is the talent from cameras, lights, and so on. Because what we found in the last couple of days, while Doug and Eddy were placing things, a lot of the time they would say, is that light about to fall off the stage? How much space do I have? So the witness camera is certainly something that becomes important. I'll turn it back to you, Doug.
Okay, I guess we might as well just go to the first setup we did. Maybe we can show what the A camera is seeing now. Oh, am I able to see it too? I'm seeing a picture of myself here.
I just wanted to, if I could, just talk a little bit more about what François was saying in regards to this witness cam. It was so important. It just made our setup and our work much easier once that witness cam actually became a reality. We've been doing this for a couple of days to try and figure out lighting setups and working in the space and stuff. And the first day we didn't have the witness cam, and we were only able to use the camera shots that we were setting to see what was happening in the stage. And so it meant a lot of the times of having to widen out the frame so that we could see what was happening around the set and everything, and then going back into the shot. So that was a little bit time consuming and a little bit of a waste of time as well. Once the witness cam was installed the next day, it made everything a lot easier, so that because we could actually see what was happening in the studio, and we could ask Nicolas and his technicians there to move certain things or add certain things, or we just had a better understanding of the space and what we were working with. Now, it kind of all started basically with a conversation that basically said, to François, which he relayed to the people in Montreal at the Grande studio, that was basically get a table, get a chair, put it in the center of the stage, get 2 lights in front, 3/4 front camera left, 3/4 front camera right, get 3 lights in the back. Same thing, 3/4 camera right backlight, 1 directly in the center, and a 3/4 light on the camera left backlight. And so with those 5 lights and the table in the center, that's basically how everything started. Once we got a camera and we got a DP, we were able to say, okay, the A camera will have a such and such a lens. Let's move the table a little bit this way. We have these LED panels now. Let's do this. Let's move the lighting around that way. So it actually started to come together. But it was basically kind of imagine making a drawing on a restaurant napkin, and that's kind of how it felt with how it all kind of started. As Doug said, we didn't have a chance to scout the space or see any of the equipment or space that was available or there, and so. I kind of sketched this out very, very roughly. And then over the last couple of days, we were able to sort of finesse it a little bit more. And so now I'll hand it over back to Dougie and the cameras and the witness cam and everything. And we can start to show you, what ultimately came about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if we go back to can we see the live full from? Yeah. So on this one, so yeah. Yeah, just keep it on the live one there. So, just a few little details. We have a 140, for those who care, we have a 144-degree shutter because of the LED video screens that we needed that to settle them down. So obviously really handy that you can do things like that. And let's say that we were at some point had to suddenly shoot the laptop screen. It may require some other shutter angle or something. So really handy to be able to control that. So in this one, we were going to do more of a sort of high key scene. So Eddy, I think this one too, we had the light panel that's flaring and blasting us out now. I think we had that dialed into a deeper blue, I think, right?
Well, I think our first setup, Doug, was going to be sort of that soft day look that we had established. Was the first
Right.
setup.
Yes.
So I can start to
Yeah.
set
Why don't you? Yeah. Push it
now.
Yeah.
Right now, basically, I have everything on at 100%, just so that for the witness cam, if anybody can sort of see that witness cam, if maybe Jeremy can pin the witness cam, they can see the space that we're working in.
Benjamin, witness, thank you.
So there's the studio in Montreal, and there's all the lights that we had placed, and everything's basically at 100% right now. And so we're going to start to build the lighting for that first kind of little setup that we did. And if you want to go back to that camera and the camera shot, I will start to set the lighting for it.
Yeah, we want to go back to the. There we go. Yeah.
Okay, stand by here.
So we're going to do like three lighting steps. So this one, once we're done playing with it, because is basically just sort of a soft wrap coming in 3/4 from the camera right there, 3/4 frontal from the camera right, and then we're sort of using the fun part is we can use a bit of light from the laptop as a sort of a bit of a fill and eye light on Abigail there. Eddie will take control.
Okay, so yeah, it's a little bit. Here we go. Because everything's at 100% presently. Stand by, and that. There we go. Okay, copy that. 69. So that.
And then we also need to change the white balance of the camera to 5600 as well.
Coming up.
And so there we go. So 664, 664. Okay.
56 dialing on both.
Yeah, great.
All right, that's that. And then, okay, Doug, looks like we are, we're reset for our.
Yeah, so this is what we sort of had played with and liked. And so, okay, so Benjamin, let's, why don't we do our little camera move that we'd programmed, set with you? Yeah, so there you go. So there's a little thing that we set up with this kind of sort of kind of light. So I guess one little interesting thing that does come up, we were talking about, François, was focus, because obviously, especially as one gets into using full frame cameras like the LF, and one wants to have really shallow focus, one's shooting wide open, say, so you get into this issue of focus pullers having to have really good feedback as well. So I guess a lot of that would have to do with what you were talking about earlier in terms of how they get a high quality signal, allowing them to pull focus accurately.
Absolutely. And right now is a great time to talk about that. There are many ways to do focus. And a couple of years ago, we've introduced an auto-tracking focus on the WCU4. And you might have wondered why it was there. Well, it wasn't there to replace the focus puller. It wasn't. One of the applications was so that when you're bringing the clapper slate, your second AC comes with a clapper slate, they've already set the focus point on the actor, and then you're asking them to move it to the slate. And if the slate is in front, it's okay. But imagine if your second unit, visual effects, the actor or the stuntman is attached to a crane at the ceiling, then you have to move the camera back, reslate, refocus, go back. You just lost a lot of time. So the idea was you press a button, and then the ultrasonic distance measurement, the UDM that's located on top of the camera, is going to pick up that distance, adjust the focus right away, and come back. So that was the intent of it. But it's also been used in other applications, like if you have atmospheric haze. If you have smoke, atmospheric haze, sometimes you look at your monitor and you think you're in focus, you have the sense that you're in focus, but this is cutting the high frequency, what's in front of it. So as a result, this could be used like that as well. And it's interesting because in a COVID-19 situation where we're streaming video out, we tend to compress the picture. And that's what Doug was referring to. Compressing video, the first thing we do, the little cheat sheet when we compress video, is to remove high frequency. High frequency is the detail that tells you you're in focus or not. So everything tends to look a little bit softer. So it becomes even more difficult to pull focus remotely. So keep that in mind. It's almost as if you had atmospheric haze. So tools like that auto-tracking focus would help. There's also a shout out to a company in Vancouver called FocusBug that connects to RWCU4. So they have the same protocol and everything. So they have these little modules that could be put in the talent's pocket or into their clothes somewhere. But the idea is that it will track the position. And as a result, you could use that with auto-tracing focus as well. There are some more advanced solutions. Shout out to another Canadian company called Cast in Toronto. If you are in the lighting environment, you probably know about WYSIWYG, a software that's used to position lights to pre-visualize it on set. But they also have a solution that's called Black Tracks that lets them position talents, move around. But that's interesting because yesterday we had a discussion, Doug and I, and he was saying, when you ask questions to companies that are doing tracking like that, they're going to say, oh yeah, you have this tracker on the person. And then Doug was saying, well, what if the person turns their head? What is the distance between their eyes, their shirt, and things like that? And they're saying, oh, we have an offset, it's okay. Well, it's not always okay, especially at large opening, so a fully open, large format sensor, we shall depth of field. So there are other alternatives as well. And one of them is a LIDAR technology that is basically an infrared sensor that scans, it's like a camera, it scans everything. So there's a lot more than just getting information about where your focus is. And we're looking into all these solutions. And as we're moving forward with remote solution, we're certainly investigating all of them, but there are solutions way past just using a WCU4 and controlling focus. There's definitely things that we can add to the lineup when it gets to that.
Yeah, and I might just, to be the prankster, add to that. Of course, I'm sure there may be a couple of camera assistants, focus pullers watching this, is that, but at the same time, it might also be great to not reinvent the wheel, and so as to make the whole sort of remote shooting situation less alien by utilizing techniques that they're more than familiar with. So, because we may be asking them, like in that shot we just did, you know, it's like, it's tricky focus wise, it's getting shallower as we get in closer. And focus pullers these days are used to working wide open quite a bit and with shallow focus, so they're do a fantastic job these days. But that's why I guess I'm sure they would say, oh yeah, it'd be best to maybe not be reinventing the wheel on this if we can make it work with our conventional focus trees and systems that we actually use. So why don't we move on to another
small second. We had a really interesting question that loops into that. For one thing, it was about lag, but before we talk about latency, lag, and focus pulling, we should talk also about all these solutions. Many people are always asking why you don't have autofocus on the camera itself, and there are cameras where you press a button, it goes into focus on the eyes and things like that. None of these systems can read your mind. And I think that what I love seeing the interaction between Doug and Eddy over the last couple of days is that they could read each other's mind. They could literally anticipate what's going to happen. And I think this happens a lot with your first AC. You develop that relationship over many years, and they can kind of guess what you want the action to be. They get that sense, and that's why you're moving from second to first to camera operator to DP. So the idea that it creates, it's part of the storytelling. So a lot of the solution today are really technical solution. It detects contrast, it goes there, that's it. When it gets to latency, I thought was interesting, the question from Arthur. Arthur is asking us, what about latency? Absolutely, it is an issue, and it means that we're probably going to continue to operate focus close to set because the latency, if we're using, let's say, Degero, which is one of the fastest or slowest latency, fastest transmission, is still about 0.8 seconds between Toronto and California, so a fairly long distance. So it is more challenging. And for that, I would just like to bring your attention, many people have asked, how do you extend the distance with your WCU4? We actually have a device, and I'm just going to point to it, that just came out that many people are probably not aware of, that was developed before COVID-19, but that was because of interference on set. So this is an external radio module, and it connects to WCU4 or to a remote head, an Arri remote head. But these are pretty impressive because they can give you miles of connection. So literally, we've tried it on the Las Vegas Strip in a really crowded environment. So it means that you could easily be doing a production where your focus puller would no longer be on set. They might be on a different sound stage. They might be on a different location. So they could be, let's say, across the street on a remote area where your video village is. So we can certainly do that, because I think that the first AC focus pulling, because of latency, remains the key challenge in remote production.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's an interesting issue too, because when one talks about remote, you get into situations where, does remote mean that the DP or the director are literally like on another planet, or like are kilometers away, or are we in a situation where they're like outside the building in a van, or however it's done? Because in critical applications, it may be like, I mean, I hate to use this word, people won't believe I'm actually saying, but actually hardwiring things, I don't know, but sometimes I think that situation needs to be explored, where these things become a showstopper.
Absolutely. When it gets to hardwire connectivity, I know that many of you have in your kit motors, you have backup cable and things like that, but I rarely see that LCS cable, that lens control system cable, the cable that can be 11 feet. It could also go to a few hundred feet. We have some operators in Canada that use them for underwater application. Shout out to Carly. So basically, if you are going to use or work in an environment where there's no right for wireless, and it could happen. You could be, let's say, in Washington where the president's going out. You could be in a military application, things like that, if there's demolition. So then in that case, no wireless is allowed. So this cable is always a good idea to have in your case.
All right, so, okay, so maybe we should move on. Let's move on to another lighting variation from our setup. So why don't we show on the screen the witness cam and the other two cameras, all three sort of cameras that we have there. And then, yeah, and then, okay, so let's go into the night setup. So let's leave the lighting the way it is just for now as a sort of a work light. And then let's, Benjamin, let's bring the camera around into that setup. And then Eddie and I can play. So on this one, I think we knocked the video screen levels down a little bit. This one here, we turned on some practicals, which again can be done remotely without people having to actually walk through the set. And then, yeah, so we'll play about, Eddie and I. We sort of figured in this, we put these practicals in, and then the globe light that we liked that was behind Abigail, we decided to use one of our backlights we'd set as a sort of a warm sort of support light and cheat that. And so once we knocked down our, yeah, we'll knock, and then we had a little light for our background. And of course, what's trickier to see on these sort of highly compressed images is we're obviously exploiting the the selective focus of the fast lens of the master prime, which is running at T1.3 right now. So because obviously in a lot of locations that's also a concern. It's not just a sort of privacy issue, but but usually when we're doing this, it's just sort of textural and, you know, just what might normally, if it was in focus, be a very distracting background can become really interesting shapes and textures. So wanted to do that. And then I think, oh, as well, yeah, too, let's switch the, I think on this one, we'll switch the Kelvin over on the color balance on the camera, on the A camera, on all of them if we want, but the A camera to say, let's just go for fun to 3200. And then that way the computer screen will come up a little colder and the practical won't be quite as fiery, although it is interesting, well, fiery like that. Yeah, or just for fun, we could split in between. Like you can even look at, why don't you go to like, go to say like 4300 Kelvin on the camera, François, maybe. So yeah, depending on, and so therefore you can see like, depending on people's taste, I mean, you can sort of monkey around with. So right now we would, the laptop itself, of course, is like, and the background displays are roughly daylight balance. So they're sort of, they're locked. But we could, of course, play around with the that warmed up backlight if we want to. So let's go. Why don't we do the other one? Let's go to 3200. That was a fun little look there. And then Abigail will be searching about on the internet furiously for some. Oh, I guess she is. And then when yeah, so I think that looks pretty interesting. And then yeah, so let's do it. We can do nice little move here. So anytime you're ready, Benjamin, let's do our little move. And I guess this really represents a much bigger space, obviously, than a lot of time I think, well, that's not necessarily true, but that people would be working in. Yeah, we just figured, what the heck, why not? Okay, so then from here, why don't we turn all the lights up again, Eddie, and just,
okay.
we can just blast them, and then we'll go into another.
Copy that.
Or, you know, or just leave them here. Yeah, you're right. We'll leave them here. And then, so Benjamin, let's go into our third move now. So we'll place the camera into its third position, and then we can just play with another lighting setup.
I think it's really great too that the you know, the witness cam is there on the screen, because everybody can sort of see where these cameras are ending up, and this cable cam. And where these lights have ended up, and you know, when they're turning on and off as I'm manipulating them here remotely from this laptop. So it's kind of neat. But then I guess when we can actually do the shot, we can maybe switch to the main camera for that. But yeah, while we set these things up, it's interesting to be able to see them sort of in a wider version, so that everybody has a look.
So let's go. So obviously this one's hard to set up in that dim light. So let's go to,
okay. Let's get some lighting going here. Stand by. Okay. This should be something. Oh, that's the wrong color. Stand by. Here we go. What we're going to do is that instead. Oh, stand by. I got to.
Yeah. So Abigail will do a little dance for us with her feet.
There we go. And right, I'm just looking at my notes. Thank you so much, everybody. So
I think initially we decided on this, we would do more of a sort of a fiery kind of bit of a fiery edge light sort of to her. And then we came up a little bit on our 8x8 soft light. So there was a little bit of wraparound, but that we didn't want to erase this one.
There we go.
I guess the question I have is, I think is that we probably could just, you could probably just like store all these things as presets. I imagine it'd be easy to just have like all sorts of presets and just pop between them. And
There's a couple of ways of doing that for preset. The orbiter does have preset that the Sky panel doesn't have. But one thing we haven't talked about, it's Stellar. Stellar is an application that we have, and an application that can be downloaded, put on a tablet, and Android or iPhone. And Stellar detects all the fixture on set. So it means that not only Arri fixture, but some third-party fixture as well. So you can just launch a detection and you would automatically see all the fixture, but you can also do your light plot. So if Eddy was to create a light plot, or if you take a picture, we can move the fixture at these places so that when you click on one, you know exactly where it is, which is super important in COVID-19 because we don't necessarily have visibility to the set. So you would say, that's the light in front, left, that's the one, and then you're able to do all the adjustment on it. So it would certainly be easier, and that supports preset, many presets.
I have noticed in using this this AnyDesk control system that when I go back to certain fixtures, that some of the settings that I previously put in had been saved or are still there. And even over the course of yesterday and today, in particular that very saturated blue airy sky panel, it took a while to sort of find the right intensity of both the light and the color, because when the camera's pointing right at it, obviously it's a little bit harder to sort of get those saturated colors. So it took a while actually to sort of come up with that remotely. But I noticed over the course of the last couple of days, I just went back to that fixture on the tab of the control system, and all those presets were still there, or not presets, but all the settings that we had found and searched were there and maintained themselves. So a lot of the time, what I'm doing, because when we're changing these lighting setups, a lot of the times I'm basically just changing the intensity of the light and once in a while the color of it. But more often than not, the settings have been sort of naturally saved, as opposed to sort of going out of my way to save them somehow. So that's pretty interesting, I thought.
Yes. Well.
All
right.
So I think we're there, Doug.
Okay. Oh, and then I think what we have to do is take our Kelvin back to, on the A camera, we'll take the color balance back to say 5600. There we go. Yeah, that's what we had. So here we basically were just our sort of our soft key and the light, any light from the computer screen, on Abigail, our daylight balance matching the color balance, and then we've just got this slightly more fiery light here. And so, yeah, okay, so why don't we get ready to do our little move? We're going to do like a little boom up and find Abigail there at her laptop once again. So anytime you're ready, Benjamin. That's great. And we'll just keep the camera there. So I guess we could say things that, like, let's say, Eddy, we decided in this position to say, well, can we make the edge light hitting, or can we make it even warmer? Yeah, sure. I also, were we going to try and change the LED screens for this? Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think we had more the cloud patterns on them. We could try that and see. I can easily make that warmer. And basically, what I did the last time was I added a full CTO here. So I guess that's what the trick we discovered is that sometimes you'll be pushing something in a particular direction and you'll simply run out of, say, Kelvin or whatever, like a color temperature to get the thing, and then you can just start adding the equivalent of gels on top of it to create more.
To remind people, Eddy's screen looks like this. So this is not actually Eddy's screen because I don't have access to his screen, but it looks like a GUI. And that GUI has basically control of all the features. So you can work in CCT mode, HSI mode, gel, source matching, and so on. So he has multiple tabs at the top, and his multiple tab in his case would be light 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. So he has 5 lights on set. So you would literally see the 5 lights, and he toggles between lights by changing the web browser page. And then after that, he can make his changes.
Oh, I got a little,
Ooh, hot pink.
What happened there? That got a little crazy. Stand by. I think we're in a funny CT mode there. That was strange with that magenta pop up there. Well, there we go again. Hold on, intensity. It's funny. Anyway, there's a bit of a learning curve, of course, to using these systems, and I don't have any. Oh, I see. Because hold on, that's why I have all that blue in there. That's why. Okay. As I say, there's a bit of a learning curve because as anything in computers, it's all about steps. You know, you don't want to miss a step, or it's easy enough to to forget something, as I have done here. Let's see. So hold on, we're gonna reset all this. And so yeah, it's there we go. And so I've added basically a full CTO to that source in a color correction filter. It's a Roscoe gel that I've added. In the gel selection portion of the GUI of the control system, to warm it up a little bit. You know, if you miss a step, like anything in computers, you know, it might start to confound you and confuse you. But as I say, the learning curve with this particular area control system is quite quick. I managed to pick it up over the course of a couple of days of just playing with it, and working with Dougie over the last couple of days has really been really interesting, because we've always talked about lighting, the two of us, over all the years that we've worked together. And we talk about lighting all the time, but it's so funny to be able to do this with him on a screen and me on a screen, and you know, the studio on another screen, and we literally live like 2 doors away from each other. So to me, I find that that's quite funny that we're so close, and we've worked together so often. But this is like, you know, we could be anywhere in the world doing this, and that's a really interesting thing about the system, and working remotely. You also, as Doug and I had talked about over the last couple of days, and with Nicolas, you know, it's really helpful that you have experienced technicians on the other end. You know, your 2 or 3 distanced technicians that you have, you know, that they have some experience, that you can you know, rely on them to do these tasks that you ask them. For example, at one point when we were doing the setup remotely, I noticed that you know, the lamp, one of the sky panels, was a little closer than I would have liked to the 8x8 soft fill, or the 8x8 frame, sorry. And so you know, it was with the witness cam, I could tell that it was a little close, and it was very easy to say to Nicolas, hey, could you potentially, you know, move that back a little bit, fill the frame a little bit more, and you know, they're experienced enough that they know exactly what you mean. So that's an important part of the whole process as well, is that you know, you don't, you know, as much as we love having PAs, you know, and assistants around, that if they had a little bit of experience in the particular you know, craft that you're working with, that would obviously be a huge help. Otherwise, it may take a little longer than you'd hoped or you'd want. So it's quite interesting in that way. You know, I think between Doug and I, we managed to come up with some very nice looks remotely with you know, the minimal amount of lighting and time and you know, sort of prep that we had. So I think to me this is a success that we can do this. You know, I hate to rehash that, but sort of call it in. You know, a lot of the time, Dougie and I, as François had said, like, you know, we can in certain instances sort of read each other's minds, or you know, because we have had this 35-year working relationship that you know, that we understand, you know, with minimal sort of effort and talking like what we're trying to achieve or how to achieve it or whatever. And that's also very helpful in these kinds of instances. Or just having a, you know, a good relationship with the DP is very helpful when you're working remotely like this. So, you know, as I said, I think with Nicolas and all his guys there and with Abigail helping us out, then I feel like it was a bit of a success. You know, I don't know, Doug, how you feel about it, but I'm sure François thinks it's a success because we've been talking about this quite a lot over the last couple of weeks and have been getting together with him online, you know, over the last couple of weeks. And yeah, I mean, you know, besides the obvious disadvantages, where, as I say, where you're not actually in the physical space, this is a close second.
I would like to bring Nicolas and Benjamin de Loop, especially Nicolas, because we've seen the composed picture, we saw the interaction. Nicolas has been in a unique situation because Quebec has reopened, one of the first provinces to reopen in Canada. So as a result, they've had shoot in that studio over the last couple of days. They've had to work with masks. They've had to bring customers in and disinfect the studio in between all of that. So I would like to turn it to Nicolas to give us a little bit of his experience about how it's been going back to work, but also a little bit of the background and how they came up with that configuration. Why did they choose that robotic system? How do they approach what's offered to a customer and so on?
Well, good afternoon. Really nice to be with you this afternoon. I'm Nicolas from Studio Grande and Grande Camera in Montreal. Yeah, to answer your question, François, it was, we didn't know how it would look like when we came back to work because of the hundreds of prescriptions, you know, hands, departments, and my job was at first anyway to decentralize the whole set. Now we have a long time live broadcast expertise. I have a long time experience on set as well. And actually it was not so complicated because that work has been done already before, since datas came to set in the 2010s. We decided to manage few of the departments, a few parts of departments out close to the set or near the set. DIT style, I would say. So that's not me. So with this experience, I would say it's slower work, volumetric from the distance, you know, like Fast Eddy was telling just before. The volumetric perception of the place is quite difficult, so we need few days to get it to step in, if you want, if I can tell it like that. And but once it's done, it goes pretty well, you know. Now the big thing here is to decentralize the set, but continue working. I mean, once our lights and our light pattern is established and our cameras are placed and the movements with all robotics we use, cable cam, We have a dolly, by the way, that we were testing this morning, a microfilm dolly that was driven by a guy in Paris this morning, and it worked pretty well. So, you know, we have all kinds of solutions. And once it's set up, we can go out of the set and other departments can get in, but the camera and lighting can continue to work and tweak. And otherwise, we could not achieve that if we would not have those remote solutions, because we would all be, as usual, everybody on the set at the same time, you know. So we got inspiration from our live broadcast background, our video assist department and DIT department, and we tried to fusion all those technology. And what's nice, I want to talk a little bit about the integration of Arri material into this kind of studio. It's quite easy because it's compatible with most platforms and consoles, and the cameras by themselves, you know, they give us so much. We can do so many things. We can manage the camera since always. The WCU helps us too. We can integrate into a live broadcast the Amira cameras, the Mini, we did that often. Then we have the live broadcast communication system. So it was quite smooth to do that. But the time, you know, and as you know, because I was long time on set as well, what I'm missing there is this family feeling. You know, I met so many the nicest people on set in my life, and this family feeling you have when you come to set in the morning, of course, it's a little missing, and I hope we won't have to throw virtual wrap parties soon. But otherwise, I mean, there are solutions with limitation on the side of creativity, but the integration here in this broadcast tabletop commercial photography studio configuration is quite easy. By the way, we can change this all and make more previs green screen studio as well, or you know, really efficient with reduced crew. And but most of our system is built close to set. Today we are pushing that further, giving the hand to Toronto, and I guess it works pretty well. Another thing I wanted to say is that on location with those Arri fixture S60, X30s, and S120s, within few minutes, but literally few minutes, you place the lamp, you turn it on, and then you have it on the computer, and you can really begin to tweak your lighting, and it takes minutes when you use as standalone. Otherwise, the integration is quite easy in any DMX platform or something like that. And concerning the camera, well, of course, people surely did work with Minis and Amiras and Alexas. They are fantastic cameras that we can integrate in all kind of system. Large format live broadcast, we do that. And well, I wouldn't say it's a walk in the park. We still have to master all that technology and to fusion that together in order to unchain our creativity, of course, like Doug and Eddie told you previously. But in case of a second wave of COVID-19, we are ready to go further than what we did during these times. François?
Excellent. I do have two questions for you, Nicolas.
Yeah.
One of them is, if Doug was to say, okay, I'm ready to shoot today. Here's my list of crew, my camera department that I want to have. Here's my lighting department. How would these people go at going back? Do they have to be tested? How does it work?
Yes, for now, of course, we have all kind of prescription, of course. But the first thing when you get in the studio is the temperature is taken. To be sure you don't have at least temperature. Then, of course, filling a formulaire, something like that, and then with if you have symptoms or not, you know, and then after that, wash hands, masks. We need to have masks. When we are working in departments, it's okay to not, but as soon as a talent is pointing in, we have to wear a mask, and we disinfect everything with a special disinfectant, of course. You know, it's a lot of work. The speed, you know, it's no more run and gun. You know, you have all departments need to take time, you know, and to be really, really focused all the time, for sure, you know. And then, of course, we have an exit. We have one door to exit, one door to come in, all those kinds of prescriptions. We tripled the space we needed for such a shoot, you know. Same thing for meals, you know, we keep at least 2 meter distance. And usually actors will get tested systematically before and after. So that's how it works, you know. But I mean, from Monday on, we will be able to be 50 people at the same place at the same moment, you know. And so this might change some things, but we will keep all those prescriptions active until we are sure, you know, that biggest problem is insurance, as you know, François.
So really good point, Nicolas. And to be clear, the regulation in Quebec is different than the regulation in Ontario and the rest of Canada. So it means there are some things we can look at in terms of feedback, seeing what's happening. What many people might not know is that Nicolas is CTO, Chief Technology Officer at Grande, but that's his full-time job. But when he has time, he's also one of our Arri instructor. And as a result, he hears a lot of the question from people related to all of our product lines. So it was maybe easier for him to integrate these products because he had some background into connectivity and all of that. I would urge people to look at their camera, look at the web menu, do these things, because what we found in the first morning is not that it was missing from the camera, is that most people didn't know it do that. Same thing with the lighting. They didn't know there was a web browser and so on. One part that we haven't talked a lot about today, and Nicolas, could you give us a sense of what was the motion in that setup? How did you do camera, control, motion, and maybe Benjamin can step in. So how did we move that camera here?
Yeah, well, we used the main camera, we used the cable cam, okay, the 3D cable cam actually, where we can really dial in positions we marked. But to talk about that, I would say Benjamin is the king, so he should step in. The mask operator.
Yeah. I was not planning to talk, so you kind of caught me by surprise. Yes,
all thinking outside the box.
Cable cam, thanks to Patrice Tivier from Flypad, who came in to do that. And we control the cable cam is fully programmable, so all the moves you saw was programmed in advance when we did rehearsal yesterday. And I was controlling the camera system from a distance. Sorry, I'm kind of losing my mask. So yeah, that's what it is. I don't really know what else to say. You kind of caught me off guard.
He was focusing as well.
That's okay.
Yeah, I was the one struggling with the focus with a T1.3.
Thank you, Doug.
So I think the moral of the story here is that we asked Benjamin to do multiple tasks.
Yes.
Because of the isolation, to be a first AC, to be a head operator. And I think that in retrospect, that's probably not the best model to use. It's too much to ask on someone. So the isolation has that limit. I noticed in the wide shot, Benjamin and Nicolas, that there was also another camera in front. So I don't know if we can go to the wide shot, but people might notice that there was also a dolly track that was going around the set. What do you use that for? What is it?
Sony.
Yeah, up there.
Well, actually, this is the microfilm dolly I was talking about, the junior dolly. that's programmable, you know, is this kind of dolly that can reach up to 60 kilometers per hour if you want. You've seen that at the Olympics and all this stuff. And literally this morning, the owner of Microfilm was driving on the tracks with the witness camera, the dolly up and down and all kind of setups with less than half a second delay or latency, which is, you still need to have somebody inside here to check for the red button to stop it if something happens. But otherwise, it can be really, really decentralized all over the world. Now, yeah, latency is a problem for sure, you know. I know that you can do surgery from Sydney, for example, in Montreal in real time, and surgeons, they need absolute real time, I guess. And so I'm curious about those solutions. So I'm looking into those solutions, but for now, the half second to a second latency, it's where we are working on, what we are working on in these days a lot, to have the possibility to make more out of it, and that we feel more, you know, in confidence with all these tools.
Thank you, Nicolas. I have a question that was sent to us regarding communicating with talents and directors. So I will launch it to Doug, and I know it's not from a technical perspective, but how would you expect, and if you had to rethink outside the box, what would be the minimum amount of communication and ways to communicate with these people that you could operate with? And the other question I would ask you is, now that we talked about robotic and movement and so on, how does it change your approach, your artistic approach from operating with a camera operator and dolly grip?
I
mean, I would think that, for instance, with working with a director, obviously it's going to be way easier if it's somebody that you have a history with, that you've worked with before. That's obviously going to make a huge difference. If it was someone I'd never met before, I would absolutely insist ahead of time to have some kind of, with social distancing, some kind of in-person thing with them, and it not always just be like a head floating on a screen. Would be really good. Yeah, because I think you need to, there's also, when you have a work with the director, there's all sorts of things you need to sort of get together so that you don't surprise each other on set. And yeah, I mean, I think it's just going to be strange because you do figure out a lot of stuff. You're used to standing next to this person. Many of the directors I work with will actually be not say at a monitor, but standing beside the camera, actually watching the actors from that position. And so you're used to being in very close proximity to them and being able to talk to them really easily and not having any kind of communication barriers like that at all. So in that way, I think that's going to be sort of an unusual thing. One of the things I think is the definition of the sort of the distancing and isolation is interesting to me, because I know, for instance, when I do a lot of day interior work, like it could be a commercial, could be a movie, whatever it is, that in terms of day interiors, I have a tendency these days, you know, I think the trends are, things are I think more simple. And a lot of the time it might just be like one big light or something very carefully placed outside sometimes, a lot of the time in day interior work. So what's exciting to me about that is that not being a huge change, that if we say, oh, we have a light outside on a stand or on scaffolding or a lift or whatever, and we can move it around, there, you know, sort of we're sort of used to doing that, like having, say, one light outside that's supposed to be the sun streaming into a living room or a kitchen in a commercial, and it's on an articulating lift or an articulating zoom boom. You go, well, that's almost what we've done here, but instead of joysticks and stuff, we're saying to the lamp operator who's up with it, okay, boom down, can you come around more, can you get around that tree, whatever. So we are used to, in a sense, working remotely already like that. But I think that's something that's very helpful, because I think that kind of lighting, I think, would be the easiest kind of thing to accommodate with these changes. You can actually have, at least I find with myself, I have less lighting gear generally in the room, I think, in a day interior. that's sort of helpful. But yeah, I don't know. Is that answer? It was in terms of working with directors and things. Is that
absolutely? It answers the question. And as far as working with remote head, cable cam, juniors, things like that, I know, Doug, you're working into the premium market, high-end budget, high-end production for people who have not had a chance to work with remote head. And if we look at the 667 guidelines and all of these guidelines coming online, it's all about remote head first, remote head first. Do you have advice? How would you approach it for somebody who has not done that transition or hasn't had the chance to work with that?
Well, I mean, in the simplest way, and this would be a true function, and all camera operators, obviously, I would think know this, but I many years ago, when remote heads started to proliferate, I got my hands PS Production Services way back there lent me an old Worrell geared head, and my whole thing was like, I better figure out the wheels, because I'm sure most people are used to operating as they come up from film students or however they do it with fluid heads, which are very sort of intuitive, and you can sort of get good with them very quickly, I think, if your mind is set on it. But that's what I did as I got proficient with a geared head, because suddenly I was on the back of process trailers using remote heads on things and stuff like that. So that's one thing I would say to people, is if you anticipate yourself getting in that situation. But on the other hand, I find myself a lot of the time on most projects working with dedicated camera operators. So these people are really good. They do this all the time, and they have the skills to switch between handheld, Steadicam, remote heads using geared systems. Joysticks are an odd thing. I mean, I've seen that being used, and that is probably strange even to a lot of experienced operators. But I would say, yeah, I don't know. Like it's weird. Like it's hard for me to picture like if I would get in a situation where I would have to deal with all of that, it wouldn't freak me out, because yeah, it's been a while, but I'm sure the wheels would all come back to me in a couple of minutes. But I think with the way this stuff is all set up, they would be thinking about getting someone that does that. But, on commercials, for instance, I think I almost always am operating, unless there's some exotic piece of equipment being used, or there, as I say, or the Steadicam, which I don't do. So if that situation was to come up, I would say to people, well, make sure you can use a remote head if you have to. It's not something you'd suddenly want to have to use and not have ever tried it before. But again, I like working with operators, and especially operators that are like way better than me. So usually not a big concern for me.
So I think that the important message here is surround yourself with the most knowledgeable people that you've worked with before, and they will help you tremendously. And that means people that you know very, very well. One thing I think we should do is we should go back to the shot that you had composed, Doug, because we've been talking a lot about theory and issues and everything, but in the end, we did all of that for this scene. So we see now the wide shot. I think we're missing our model. Nicolas is going perfect, but maybe we can just go back just to recap what we've covered today and why you made the choice of lights in the position you had. And I know that, Eddie, you had requested to have some light modifier on some of the lights. Some of them don't. Maybe you can tell us a little bit as to how you came up with that in this scene.
Well, I mean, basically, I think when you do something like this, like I think it's, in this situation, we said, well, let's create a few different like moods and stuff like in that. It may be if one was doing a particular, like say a real commercial, for instance, that was taking place in a kitchen, in a real sort of kitchen location, it's actually probably kind of likely that all the shots you're doing in there would have to match. And so you wouldn't be going from day to night or things like that, generally speaking. But I think the assignment becomes, you're trying to have things like, can things that are functioning as backlights can they turn into key lights? I mean, initially before we did this, I think we sort of, Eddie and I, for instance, chatted about the thing. We thought, well, can we do something where at one moment a bigger soft source from the 8x8, that's just a dim fill light on the shadow side, say, of the actor. And then when we do a different setup, will shut everything else off, and then that will actually, instead of being a soft, dim fill light, will suddenly become a big soft key. And then we toyed with ideas like that. So it starts off as a dim, soft fill light, then it becomes, say, like a cold, soft, like northern exposure window light or something like that. But in this instance, what we found here was, just because we were on this stage and we were sort of like, oh, and all the stuff is there, we're going to go with what we found. So for instance, on the stage, like the large LED panels were already there and they don't move. So we said, okay, well, we're up on the stage. This is how we'll do it. And then we, yeah, so I guess that's the thing. And so we just sort of positioned things where we wanted them. You know, you obviously would have these issues of hiding things, which is another thing in terms of rigging. So it does raise the issue of having people that really know what they're doing in terms of, you know, like grip and electrics on the set at some point. If you're trying to do a number of things, you know, there's many types of lighting that are really, would stay out of the way. Like you notice in most of the stuff, it's very super frontal. Like they, you know, I mean, you can get away with just putting sort of a light over top of the camera, but then you're obviously not going to get much sort of mileage from that or sort of much interest. And even the setups that we did here, some of them we've kept sort of brighter, but you can see how if by remotely Eddie could just take them down, we could just knock the fill light down to nothing, and then tell Abigail to dim the computer screen down, which is also acting as a bit of an eye light on her. We can do things like that. And so you can really sort of transform it. It all depends, I guess, on the mood and the feel of it, where people might say, oh, this is too dark. And then so you may have to like be bringing things up and whatever. Part of the impression, what we're doing too, obviously, is there's a large amount of black curtains in the background, which tend to give this thing a bit more of a sort of a moody feel. But if you can imagine, if we were in like a real sort of location, like somebody's like living room or kitchen or something like that, then we might be into the opposite situation where we're actually trying to keep some kind of contrast and texture to it. And then lighter toned walls, the opposite of this, might actually be our enemy. And so, you know, then you have to get into things like light tools or things like that. But I think one of the tricks is with this kind of thing is the more you can anticipate that kind of thing ahead of time, because of course people will resist if you're trying to bring something in or you're trying to change something once you've started. You're sort of trying to be out to avoid that. That I guess the more sort of confidently one can work and set it up and check it out, then it's obviously going to be smoother, because yeah, we're used to, oh, just bring this thing in a little bit or move that in. And it may be undesirable to have people on set moving stuff around once you get started.
Fantastic. All really good points. I do see we're almost need to wrap it up. I would just mention that for people who want to know more, especially about the camera movement, we haven't talked a lot about that today. My colleague Alan Lennox is preparing an online tutorial that will be talking about DSRS3, but he will also integrate a 3D cable cam in it, and he will integrate something called a magnet. So Benjamin is a magnet expert, but for those who are not, who have not been, who have not worked with this product, the idea is that you can connect the camera to an electromagnet, it goes in a cable cam, then it can go down and then move around. It was used in 1917. So Alan's going to be talking about different solutions that can help you in this COVID-19 situation to bring back dynamics, bring back movement in your shot, make it more interesting. And I think that today what we were trying to show is that you can still craft a proper picture. You can still have some dimension, some depth in your picture, because we've seen in the last week or two, since people have been going back to work, again, a panic sense, a sense of panic, let's go back to get a picture. And we're starting to see those ready to shoot set that basically are like a road case that go in front of the actor. And all these situations, you have a camera in front of the actor and a light on top. So it doesn't give you a lot of creative freedom. And I expect that the next phase of the Zoom look is going to be a higher quality picture, but they all look the same. So I want to say thank you to everybody on the call, especially Doug, Eddie, Nicolas, Benjamin, Abigail, but also a special shout to Jeremy and Christina. What you have not seen is that in the background, we're looking at questions, we're looking at emails. We have Eddie, Jeremy switching things, Christina moderating all of that. So there's a lot of work that goes into that above and beyond the remote production. So things that you wouldn't have to worry about if you were to do a remote production. Maybe one small details I forgot to mention, and there was a question about that. We are using the Zoom platform to go to Facebook Live and YouTube Live, but there are other solutions that are commercial solutions, and we've worked with one solution called Evercast. And I think that one of the questions that people are going to ask is about security, privacy, and Evercast is one of these social media connection that is geared toward the film industry. So the difference that the latency is really low, it is protected and it's accepted by most major studios. So the Netflix, Warner Brother, and all of that. So there are solutions out there. They are more expensive. So what we try to do today is really take the riskiest route using traditional social media to create that. But there are solutions that would be the Gero, that would be LiveView, that we use in some of that connectivity, that it would be Evercast, that it would be satellite transmission, satellite truck, and so on. So there's a lot of things that can be done. So I will now give it back to Doug, Eddie, and everybody one after the other. If you have last notes for people who are attending.
Okay, yeah, my mic is on. Thank you so much. As I said, it was a quite a positive experience, all in all. Without being there and ever stepping into that stage, and as Doug said, so we found, there will always be sort of little surprises along the way that that you hadn't planned for or thought of or anything. And one of the major ones, for example, that we faced on this particular setup was that that there was a raised stage present. We hadn't really thought of that or were prepared for that, but like in all of our experience in filmmaking, you sort of work with what you have, and you if there's issues like that, you work around them. You move the table back a little bit, or you do whatever you have to do to sort of make it how you want it. As I said, the learning curve on this for me was quite quick. It was easy enough to sort of figure out and to play with. Initially, I am not the sort of computer expert that you might think I am. I sort of rely on my wife and my son, who are more computer experts. But I was able to. The first time it was somewhat confusing to connect with the AnyDesk system and being on a Zoom meeting at the same time. And what I've basically done is I've set up the control system on a laptop to my left, and I'm using an iPad in front of me to see the set and the cameras and everything like that. It made it a little bit easier because to switch back and forth between all of the screens was a little confusing for me, and this proved to be much easier. But the second time around, I was able to do it by myself, and I just did it on my iPad at the cottage. So it was quite easy, and just to be able to play with these lights like that is kind of neat for me. I'm an old school guy, and to be able to have all of these functions at my fingertips, where I would normally request it from a board op over a walkie-talkie. This is kind of interesting and neat. As I said, I found it a positive experience, and just to be lighting again after all these months off. I mean, I'm getting desperate to do lighting. I've lit the front of my house. I put an LED lighting system inside my son's picture window. I'm desperate to do lighting, and so to be able to work like this with Doug, François, Nicolas, and all the guys there, it was really a real treat, because I love lighting and I really miss it. You don't gaff in the film industry for 35 years if you don't love gaffing, you know, and so this was really great. And thank you to Arri, and thank you to everybody, you know, for giving us the chance to do some lighting and to make pretty pictures again. Because as I said, I really, really miss that. And, you know, whatever form it comes back in, it will be weird, and especially for guys like Doug and I who have been working together all this time, you know, to have to think like we're going to go back, we're going to wear a mask, we're going to have gloves, we're going to have booties, we're going to have whatever it's going to turn into. You know, it may be difficult, but you know, we want to make pretty pictures and do beautiful lighting. And so thanks everybody.
I mean, I would just add that as filmmaking always is, it's a real sort of cooperative thing. You're working with all sorts of people, and you're also relying on so many people to pull their end of it together. And I find it's really noticeable in something like this, whereby there's all sorts of technology going on that I don't understand. And when you're doing your thing, you don't want to have to worry about it. And it's really good to worry about, you know, that to know that that's what other people are dealing with, and that, you know, it's that sort of thing where you really need everybody is doing their thing really well, because you're also interdependent, which you normally are on a film set anyways. But I find with this, it really, really highlights that, where you become so much more aware of it than usual. And yeah. And my next thing is I'm doing the color grading on the last feature film I did, which is going to be sort of an interesting thing, which it may involve some of this kind of technology or not. We'll see. But so it extends through all phases of it, whatever you're doing. But I would think that one last takeaway from this would be to figure out the pre-planning really carefully of how you get to know a place, who can get in there ahead of time and photograph it or videotape it if we're not allowed in, because we just take for granted that we go into places and scout them and talk about it, make a plan, come back and do it. But at every step of what I just said there is now been interrupted, then I guess you need to, even if it was like the house owner, okay, can you pan your iPhone around and show us, okay, what's behind you, and whatever it takes, the more information you have, the easier it's going to be to do it.
What kind of relationship do you have with your neighbors?
Yes, exactly. Well, I meant not neighbor, the location owner.
Yes, no, exactly. So that you know if you need to put a light in the neighborhood.
Oh, yes, right. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
The Hatfields and the McCoys, right? It's like, yeah.
I will turn it over to Nicolas now.
Yeah, so if I would just add be safe, stay safe, and be creative. And come in, we're open. That's it. And we are working, on a daily basis on perfectioning all these methods. All right?
Thank you very much, everyone. I forgot to say one thank you to Patrice Thivierge for helping us with the 3D cam. Thank you very much, Patrice. And I know that every rental house is working to go back to operation. There's been a shout out to William F. White, who have done a really, really thorough document, really interesting to read as to what to do, how to be careful for prepping equipment, all of that. So lots of valuable information in there. So on that note, I would like to thank everybody who attended in the name of Arri, myself, and everybody in the call, and in the name of the CSC. Thank you very much, CSC, and everybody for attending. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you soon online.
Bye.